Welcome back to another one of my videos. As always, I find these stories that I read to you from different subreddits on the Reddit website. And I always leave a link in the description. So that way, instead of watching gameplay through the video, you can read along if you would like to. That said, let's get into the video. The Difference Between Monsters and Men, Part 4. Rocco twisted the rusted door handle and shoved it in with his shoulder. The second my weapon light clicked on, I felt my intestines lurch. Rusty red smeared the walls and clotted in the sawdust on the smooth concrete floor. Chunks of dried out skin lay scattered over everything, and clouds of black flies buzzed around the various tufts of hair stuck to bits of yellowed bone. Skulls had been heaped up in one corner like stashed toys in a child's room, some small, some large, of rodents, cats, dogs, and deer. More than one looked human. I noted the odd watch lying amongst the bones, or a discarded shoe, or a torn scrap of denim soaked in dried blood. More handprints adorned the walls of what had at one time been a small break room, but the room stood in empty silence, even as our boots shuffled to a crunching halt on the death-ridden floor. "Clear," Aussie grunted, and the word echoed across the lips of the mercs around me. "Clear," I parroted, and backed up on the next door with them, my heart roaring inside my chest. This had just been a small antechamber, a side room, a place where the fiends stored their kill and enjoyed throwing their scraps around like demonic monkeys. If they were still here, then the bigger room would have them, and have them by the dozen. Aussie gave Rocco the signal, and he kicked the next door in with all his might. Inky shadows swirled with dusty before my eyes. Darker than it should have been with all the windows on the building. I blinked, letting my corneas adjust slowly, and as they did, my heart did a flip-flop inside my chest. Macabre fires were strewn all over the wood chip-covered floor, some piled on top of one another, a few with pale limbs still twitching. There were close to 36 of them, eerie, white-eyed puppets with their pale grayish skin and ragged clothes, hauntingly human in the dim glow of our weapon lights. Hazy eyes gazed sightless at some faraway scene, their horrific faces still, jaws hanging open in rigor mortis to reveal their stubby wooden teeth. Black spatters of blood cooled in the sawdust, and everywhere my light shone, I caught the glimmer of hundreds of spent brass rifle casings. Flies hummed greedily at their feast, and I swept my light over the corpses in a mix of relief and disappointment. So much for low impact, I thought to myself. Looks like New Wilderness bit off more than they could chew. Aussie nudged one of the few bodies in the room that were a tattered black polo shirt with his boot. This patrol must have gotten cornered and ran out of ammo. I figure the freaks who survived moved on before sunrise this morning. Smart little buggers. A soft rustle echoed behind me, and I turned to find Crow shining her weapon light on a body slumped in a far corner, half covered by a mound of dead puppets. The figure's head bobbed, and it coughed. All four of us stared at the torn, shattered girl wheezing through shredded lips, her bite mark-ridden arms refusing to move as she dragged each gargled breath down. Like the other members of the New Wilderness Ranger Force, her empty gun lay not far away, and dark red stained the wood chips around her. She was scrawny and pale, almost gray from blood loss, and there were patches of her mud-colored hair that had been torn out by her roots, Despite this, I couldn't help but notice how small she seemed, how young, and something in my chest twisted in pain at seeing the name Melissa stitched on her blood-soaked polo shirt. I lowered my rifle, both arms shaking with bewilderment. She could be Locksmee's age. Crow, wait, don't. Aussie's low warning cut out as Crow threw herself on the wounded girl with startling speed. Her eyes blazed with a dark fire I hadn't seen before, and the auxiliary fighter flung her rifle aside like she'd been starving for such a moment all day. Frozen in horror, I could only watch her grasp the wounded ranger by her dark hair and tip her skull back against the cold sheet metal. Steel flashed in the light. And fresh red blood sprayed across Crow's gas mask visor. She brought the knife down again and again, spraying blood with each stroke, and beneath the black rubber of her blood-soaked gas mask, Crow shrieked in a guttural exertion that dripped with hatred. The wounded girl's one remaining eyes flew open in shock and pain, and she stared at Crow in a pleading agony, while rivers of red drained down her shirt, front from the trench in her neck. Crow pinned her to the wall, abyssal fury in her gaze, as if willing the ranger to know what she was doing. Seconds later, the girl's eyes glazed over, and both her shattered legs stopped twitching. Oh my God. I shook my head to try and drive the panic from my brain. What had I just watched? Secretive or no, Elsar had sent us in to protect people, to stop the anomalies from migrating, to contain the effects of the breach. This wasn't our mission. This wasn't what I'd signed up for. This wasn't war. This was murder. Crow's head lowered, and she sucked in deep, slow pants, as though she'd exhausted herself. Crow. Aussie crouched a few feet away from her, his tone soft, almost like someone dealing with a wild animal. Private. Hey, look at me. Tex and Rocco shifted on their feet, and I couldn't move, too stunned to think or speak. Crow shook like a leaf, one hand still clutching the bloody knife, her panting ragged as if she fought waves of nausea with every breath. Slowly edging close enough to give her shoulder a squeeze, Aussie pulled her upright on the balls of her feet. Sarah. My mouth hung open. I'd never learned anyone else's name here, only ever sharing my own with the squad, and something about the way he said it made Crow seem like less a statue, and more like a person. Her head craned upward, and Crow's shoulders slumped in an apologetic, half-ashamed grimace. Sergeant, I know. Aussie patted Sarah's back and nodded toward the door we'd come through. Take a minute. Go get some air. We'll finish this. He offered her a hand up, but Crow shook her head, climbing to her feet all by herself, and snatched her rifle to slowly shuffle out the door. She never so much as looked our way, and stepped callously around the other bodies as if they were stones lining a garden path. That's the third time this month. Tex kicked a clump of sticky red sawdust, his words spoken through gritted teeth. Seriously, how long are you gonna let this go? She lost everything, Tex. You were in Collingswood when the rockets came down. Aussie gestured at the dead ranger with a weary sigh. Can you blame her for hating them? Tex's eyes narrowed into angry slits behind his visor mask, and he threw a frustrated hand into the air. So we're tolerating war crimes now. This girl was barely old enough to drive a car. She wasn't a threat. We have to get Crow transferred before she kills more people. And when she gets promoted, Aussie's tone turned angry, and he jabbed a finger at the door. You know how the suits are. Command won't help her. They'll feed her worst side and turn her loose. I'm not shipping her off to some corporate hack so they can turn her into a killing machine. Why bother? Glaring at them both, Tex spun on his heels. and headed for the door. We already have. Rocco started forward as if to say something, but Aussie caught him by the arm. Leave it. I'll talk to him later. Grudgingly, Rocco sauntered off, and Aussie slung his rifle to one side to beckon me closer. Kaba, a moment. My knees almost knocked together, but I crossed a few yards to stand next to Aussie, the two of us standing over the murdered girl in ancient Silas. Aussie said nothing for a few moments, his toffee-colored eyes heavy with sadness. Corporate can't know. He met my gaze and swept an arm in the macabre room around us. Not a word about any of this. As far as we're concerned, this building was empty when we got here. My lips stuck to each other under my mask, and I wished so very badly for a glass of water. But what about the government? What if they find out? Congress would never stand for Cabo. Who do you think gave LSAR rocket trucks? Something in the way Aussie spoke made pain snake through my chest, as though I were watching a superhero fall from the sky. Why do you think we haven't shelled New Wilderness into oblivion yet? Why do you think we haven't just evacuated the rest of the county? This isn't a rescue, it's an experiment, a test to see what happens to a human anthill when it gets kicked. All we're here to do is keep the ants from figuring that out. Fury built in me, indignation welling up as hot tears in my eyes. But you saved people. You tried to stop Crow. Why can't we say anything? He put a heavy hand on my shoulder, as if Aussie could sense my torment, and hated to see me suffer as well. If we try to stop them, they'll blast the entire region with more warheads than God, and there won't be anyone left to save. Crow wants vengeance, and corporate will let her cut throats if it means they get assets to the freaks out there. But if she's with us, she'll only kill 1 or 2 each month, instead of a few hundred. Controlled murder, I thought to myself. Shame burned across my face because deep down I knew Aussie was right, horrifying as it was. We had to keep Crow contained, just like the monsters roaming the countryside, instead of doing the right thing and putting a stop to the bloodshed, all because somewhere, in some high-rise office safe in the big city, men in suits wanted to harvest Barren County for all it was worth. Giving me a light slap of encouragement on my upper arm, Aussie trudged past me toward the lumber mill doorway. Let's get go, mate. Gotta keep moving. Nightfall will be here soon. Standing alone in the shadow of the mill, I paused and looked down one last time at the dead girl. True bravery is being willing to do hard things for the good of others. Shrugging off my pack, I pulled out my notepad and met the hazy eye of the corpse. Melissa, I wrote in the best cursive I could muster and scribbled the date beside her name. Everything was upside down, but that didn't mean that I had to be. I would remember her. I would remember them all, so that when this finally ended, the world could know the truth. Monsters can never be so horrible as man. If you liked that video, then like the video. If you're going to bed soon, sweet dreams. And if you have a full day ahead of you, I hope it goes well. Thank you for taking your time to spend on watching one of my videos on my channel, and I'll catch you in the next one. Ciao.